Hi there, I'm Marius, and today we are going to take a look at a concrete example with end-to-end relationships of how we can leverage the Power Pages web API to manipulate data in Dataverse and provide a customized user experience. For this video I've prepared something. Like any good cook, it otherwise would take too long to give you that knowledge. I have built a simple identity access management app. This contains the contacts, which will be our Power Pages portal contacts. Then we have some permissions, and then you can request those permissions in the requests. So let's first do it as someone in the back office would do it. I'll give the request a name. I will select a contact. That will be Marius Wodke, myself. And then I can save, and then in a second step I can associate via end-to-end relationship some permissions, and then the member of the back office approves or rejects the request. So to have some self-service options in this process, of course it is nice with a Power Page. So what I've configured here is a Power Page with this request permission navigation item. Here we see the first step, so I will just submit it, everything is pre-filled. And then under permissions, this is the second screen with a different URL. And also notice here's already an ID given. So on this request, I will select some permissions, add them and submit. And now in requests, I will find this request right here with the permissions I selected. It's in status requested. So me as the back office member, I only need to select is this approved or rejected. So let's reject this one. For this form, I've used two basic forms. One with the first tab of a form in mode insert. And then in the on success settings, I've said, okay, you will redirect to step 2 and you will append the record ID to this query string in the parameter ID. In the second step, this will only display a success message, but I've used some basic form metadata to set the status code to requested, and for the subgrid, I've added here a configuration to add the add button and remove button to add or remove permissions from the request before submitting it. So how can we make this better now with Web API? And for that, let me first get to my web files. I've created two of them. The save ajax.js resides under the home, and it hosts something from the documentation I will link you in the description. This is the wrapper Ajax function. So this is straight copied from here. Let's take a look at the save Ajax. It defines a web API function and then save Ajax. So web API.save Ajax is a function now, and this performs an Ajax request but adds a request verification token to it. Otherwise, the web API of Power Pages will just reject the request. That script I've added to the request permission step 2 page right here, and I've also added the other script we will explore later. This just has a longer URL. This code then goes on, it extracts from the URL the ID and assigns it to an ID page. I could do this in JavaScript as well, but sometimes Liquid is just easier. Then we have a fetch XML for the permissions, and only the permissions which are currently active, to exclude anything that was deactivated, so like legacy permissions. And then this is currently commented out. Let's add this in. There are checkboxes created. For each permission there's a new checkbox, and this has an ID of the permission ID, and at the end here an onChange function which is called handle checkbox, and it uses the checkbox as an input itself because this has an ID and the ID we extracted from the query string. So let's sync this change to the Design Studio. So let's save this and sync the change to the Design Studio. And now you can see all the checkboxes being generated. Of course, they are just placed wrong here, and this is because in the liquid, the form is just one big block here, and yeah, the checkboxes need to be either above or below. To solve this, I've used here in the JavaScript, I've called an onload function, and this onload function right here detaches the permission checkboxes and prepend them right before the end-to-end subgrid. We can't see that in the Design Studio because it's not executing JavaScript, but if we preview the page and start a new request, we can see that the permissions checkboxes are now within the form right before the subgrid. So let's try this out. I will select, no, I will first find my permission request. It's currently empty. I will first select some permissions and then refresh the subgrid over at my Identity Access Management app. And here I can see the permissions. I can also deselect them again, refresh, and they will be gone. So now I can submit and the back office member could approve or reject this request. How does this work? So when the checkbox state changes, this function is called, and if the box is checked, then we add a permission, and if not, we remove the permission. So add permission works like this. It's called the function we defined earlier in the other file, webapi.saveAjax, and this takes the same parameters as a regular Ajax call, so a regular fetch call. You have a type, in this case post, then the URL always starts with _API, then the logical name of the entity with an S at the end to mark it as plural. And then this is very similar to what you know from the standard web API from Dynamics itself. In the round brackets here, I provide a GUID to the request. This is the one we extracted from the URL. And then for an end-to-end relationship, we go with the schema name of the end-to-end relationship $ref to mark that in the body, which is here the data parameter, we will provide a reference, and that reference is at OData ID, then the URL of the portal /_API, then again the plural name of the other entity and its GUID. Remove permission works very similar, just it changes a little bit. In this case you won't pass a body and the type is delete, and instead of passing a body, this is just directly marked in the URL which permission do you want to delete. So let's take a look here with F12 and the network tab. I will request a new permission. And now if I select read magazines, you have the $ref entry here. The URL was the portal URL _API. Then everything we just discussed. Right here you can see the GUID as a resolved ID. And then in payload we will see the permission that is associated here. And very similarly, if I deselect, I have another entry here. This does not have a payload, and here in the URL you can see the ID of the request and the ID of the permission, and it was deleted, and there is just no response for end-to-end entities here. You can also create entities, you can update, you can delete everything, you can, or not everything, but most of the things you can do with the web API of Dataverse as well. One important fact I have hidden from you until now, in site settings, I had to enable some things. Let's take a look. It's everything blocked down here at Web API. So for each entity you want to be manipulatable with this Web API, you need to enable it. So it's Web API slash the logical name slash enabled equals true. Then you need to say which fields can you edit. And this is in this case only the end-to-end relationship. And also for debugging purposes on my development instance, maybe not in the production instance, I also add the inner error, which sometimes gives you which gives you valuable information about the errors. So why it is rejected by the portal, was there maybe an this sometimes gives you valuable information of why your request was rejected. Maybe there was a plugin error, maybe you made a bad request really by specifying a wrong request, or maybe it is not, this field is not allowed because you did not specify it in the fields here. I think selecting the checkboxes here makes it easier rather than to click add and then select things from here, but it comes at a cost. The subgrid was really easy to configure, it's really fast. Doing it with the checkboxes, with this JavaScript code here and the fetch XML query here and the HTML and so on. So this takes much more time to configure, and it's still not perfect. You see, the styling here is not good. It would need more work here. Also, if I select some things here and we wait for a second and reload, you can see that the standard grid noticed this on the given ID that there are already permissions, but my checkboxes did not. This is because nowhere in my code I read the actual already assigned permissions. So I would either need to add another fetch XML here, or in the JavaScript I could add, in the onload function for example, I could add another web API.saveAjax call with the type get to get the existing permissions. But of course this is then even more code, and it will take more time to make this the perfect solution. So think about when you are really using the web API and those custom code steps, because they should only be used for the most crucial user experience steps. Otherwise, the standard components are better suited for the purpose, as they will require less maintenance. Also, with this form use case, think about encapsulating the code into a PCF control. With the PCF control, of course, you wouldn't use the fetch XML here. Instead, you would also use the web API to query out the active permissions. But it would allow you to directly insert it into the form, and maybe it's reusable, so you can use it on other forms quickly as well. But there might be other use cases that simply do not fit forms. Yeah, they need to work differently. So in that case, the web API is a valuable option to have.